I wanted to take the time to go over the patterns included with Evolution Clawhammer Banjo. Not just the clawhammer ones, but also all the fingerstyle banjo rolls that it includes as well. So let's set up the chord mode first. I'll go to the chords section, and I'm just going to go with the automatic chords mode. And what this does is it allows you to play even just a basic triad in the main playing range, which is these blue keys right here. And that will automatically translate it into a banjo voicing that takes into account the current fretting position, capo position, any alternate tuning that you might be using. So this is a really handy mode, and that's usually what I recommend people start out with. When you're using any of these chord modes, just bear in mind that the main playing range won't make any sound anymore because it's used to select chords instead of play single notes. So next, let's go to the strum section of the interface. And this is just a blank initialized preset, but if you click right here, you can get a drop-down menu of all of the different presets that are included with the library. So it starts out with a bunch of clawhammer presets here, and then right here in the list, we get all the rolls. Now from this preset onward, if you own Evolution Bluegrass Banjo, you'll recognize these because it's all the same banjo rolls. Only with Evolution Clawhammer Banjo, these are played fingerstyle instead of with finger picks like in Bluegrass Banjo. So let's start out with the clawhammer ones first, and then we'll get to the rolls afterwards. So here's just a basic clawhammer preset, and the key assigned to the pattern is C1. So I'll start out by just playing a basic C major triad in the main playing range, and then I'll press the C1 key. Okay, basic bum-diddy pattern where you have the drone string getting plucked by the thumb. You know, on these are 16th notes, so it'd be 1, E, and so it's happening on the of every beat. And it's 2 downstrokes with the backs of your fingernails, and then that drone string pluck there. So there are a bunch of different variations of this. Let's just go through some other options. So this is that same sort of bum-diddy pattern, but it's targeting that first string here. And if I go to the next preset, this targets the second string. Right, and then we've got one that targets the third string. So what you could do is you could load these patterns into the different pattern slots here, of which there are 6, and they're each assigned to these keys shown here. So C1, C#1, D1, and so forth. But you can always remap those by clicking on the note name and then pressing the key you want to assign it to. I just leave them the way they are mapped by default, but depending on how many keys your MIDI controller has, you might want to move them elsewhere on your keyboard. All right, let's keep moving through these other patterns. We've got that same pattern, but it's targeting the 4th string. Okay. So this one is sort of a hybrid between some clawhammer strums and sort of a banjo roll here. So there is a bunch of creative patterns like that included as well. Okay. So the other thing I should note is the overall dynamic of the pattern is controlled by the velocity of the strumming pattern key. So if I play the key louder, it plays the entire pattern louder, and if I play really softly, as you can hear, it plays the entire pattern sort of scaled down to that dynamic. So let's move on. So you can hear, just as a side note, when I move to the 5 chord, which is D major in the chord progression, it's still playing that drone string, which is tuned to a G, which is sort of that suspended 4 in the chord. Now, if you want to change that and make it so that the drone string will only play when it belongs to that particular chord, you can go to the setup section here, and if you scroll down, you'll see this setting called Use Drone in All Chords. So that's enabled by default. But if you disable it, then, and if you play that 4 chord, D major, it's just going to ignore the drone string. And then when I switch to something that has that G in it, then it will play it. So for now, I'm just going to leave it enabled. Okay, let's go on to the next. So that's sort of a Travis picking sort of pattern. So as you can see, this is the articulation right here above each of these notes, and it's set to the fingerstyle sustain. So you can see in this pattern, I have these strums played with the clawhammer sustain right here, and then these notes here, which are sort of a banjo roll, those are played fingerstyle, as you would. Here's a variation of that pattern. So as you can see in the name of this preset, drop thumb, what drop thumb in banjo playing means is just that your thumb, which is usually just plucking the drone string, is moving or dropping to other strings, right? So that's all that means. And here's a variation of that where it doesn't use the drop thumb. Okay, so now we're going to get into the rolls. So I'm going to kind of skip around through these presets and explain the logic behind the naming. So here we have forward rolls and reverse rolls. And so let's just talk about those really quickly. Let's see. There's a very specific pattern. I'm going to start out with the one that leads with the thumb. So you can see the thumb play the drone string right here, and then you'll see the pattern go basically 5th string, 2nd string, 1st string, 5th, 2nd, 1st, 5th, 2nd, and then it repeats, the pattern repeats. But you'll see it's basically like a group of 3, that same 3, and then 2, right? I'll play it for you. It's a little hard to keep track of where the beat is without, like, you know, drums or something else that's, you know, kind of accenting things. So as you can see from the name, this pattern leads with the thumb, and then those numbers, those correspond with the strings. So for example, if I go to this first one, the forward roll, the pattern will lead with the index finger, and the strings it uses are the 1st string, 2nd string, and the 5th string, which is the drone string. So let's load that one. Starts with the index, you know, and then you can see it using the 2nd string, 1st string, and 5th string. And it's the same pattern, it's essentially just starting in a different place in the pattern. Right, so then if I change to this variation, you can see from the numbers, it's the same pattern, but it's using the 1st string, 3rd string, and 5th string instead. Right, so let's keep going. And then, so those two were both index lead, you know, so the pattern started with the index finger. Here's the ones that start with the middle finger. Right, same exact pattern, you'll recognize it right here, but just by starting on a different finger gives you very different accents, you know, in terms of what chord tones are getting played. And so there's a variation here where it's using the 3rd string instead of the 2nd. Okay, and then we have these that we showed at the beginning with the thumb leading. And then I think there's a variation of that, yeah, that uses the 3rd string. So these combinations aren't exhaustive, but there's enough, definitely enough to get you started. So those are all the forward rolls. Now we'll move on to the reverse rolls. let's start with the thumb lead. And it's basically the same pattern, but you'll notice rather than ascending, it's descending. So it's just going the other direction. So it's the same deal where you have, two groups of 3 and then a group of 2, and it repeats. And then you have the same variations where instead of using the 2nd string, it's using the 3rd string. Let's see. And then you have the same thing where you have the index lead, middle lead, and thumb lead. Okay, so those are all those rolls, and then let's go to, these are what's called square rolls. That's what the SQ stands for. Square rolls, and they are stationary. So that's, I don't think, a banjo term, it's just something that I named it. That means that the thumb is stationary, it's not moving between strings. So the square roll pattern is a group of 4, basically. So you don't get that syncopation that you do with the other rolls, but in certain situations, that might be what you want to use for the pattern. And so there's a variation for the 3rd string, 4th string, and the 5th string, and that's just which string the thumb is playing. So if I go to the 4th string, and then here's with it on the 5th string, which is the drone string. Okay, and then somewhere I have a weird sort of hybrid of those, which is, so this is stationary, so the thumb isn't moving, and it's basically a forward and reverse roll combined. Here's what this sounds like. Okay, and then there's a couple others. We have, let's see, alternate version of that. So the alternate means that the thumb is alternating between 2 strings. So while those other patterns were stationary, the thumb is moving between strings in those. And so you have those same square rolls here with the stationary thumb. You have them alternating, and the number 3rd and 4th stands for the strings that the thumb is alternating between. So in this preset here, the thumb is moving between the 3rd and 4th string. Okay, and then here's the 4th and the 3rd string. Fifth and 3rd. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers all of the patterns here. And as I mentioned before, all of these patterns starting here onward are shared with the Evolution Bluegrass Banjo library. Except those, of course, are played with finger picks instead of fingerstyle, like in the Clawhammer Banjo. Anyway, so I hope this video contained helpful information, and thank you for watching.